What do those pictures tell you? To me, they are a language trying to describe a world that cannot be described. And this is how it all started. In October 20th, 1997, a small plane crashed in the mountains of Costa Rica. And one of the dead passengers appeared to be my husband since 20 years and the father of our 2 children. And he had traveled to Latin America to work as many times before, but now he didn't return alive home. And from one second to another, he was gone, and I was flung into darkness, and that was an absolutely new landscape to me, a new dark horizon. Let's see. Some weeks later, how is it? It's not working. Let's see. I wanted to show you some pictures. Oh, that's the wrong way. So, let's see. That. Here we go. Some weeks later, before his body arrived, some of the things found in the scene of the accident were returned home, and among them was his broken camera with broken glasses. It was put in a little small plastic bag, together with the earth from the soil from the ground where he had fell. And I remember it smelled from tropical decay and humidity. There is no name for this nightmare. So in an effort to deal with my desperation, I took those broken parts of the camera and I made a picture. And without knowing it, I had begun to make a story, and this was the first picture in this story. It was a journey of grieving and trying to tell something about it. And then I proceeded to make pictures during the following 2.5 years. I just put them in a pile and I dated them, and I decided not to censor anything. That I promised that to myself. But I couldn't even look at them. I just put them there in that pile. At that time, I was a documentary photographer working with reportage and portraits in Sweden and abroad. And I had come to this new landscape, and I wanted to portray this world. And I felt my tools, my photographic tools, were not enough any longer. I had to find a new language. So my work took a dramatic turn. But in the midst of this horrific experience, freedom opened up. I felt like I had nothing to lose because I had already lost everything. I could suddenly do whatever I wanted. And also my dark room was a very symbolic place. It was just as claustrophobic and dark as the psychological storm I was living in that time. And really I liked to be there because I wanted to confront it all. This image here contains for me a tremendous rage and a large force and explosion and extinction. And as you see, also the camera is dead. So now I started to work without a camera. I started to make photographs without a camera, and that's called photograms. So there's no camera between me and the image. The way to work is very physical and direct, and it's also an old technique from the beginning of history of photography. What you need is a totally dark room. You need paper that will be your negative. You put something on the paper, you expose it for light, and then you develop it. And it's a very random and tentative technique, actually. And most of the pictures I make are bad. I mean, maybe some good prints, but most of it is bad. So you have to be very patient. And I can never imagine the image before in advance. I can never, it just happens during the time. It's like a dialogue between the unconscious and the material. In the dark room, I was like a blind person trying to find my way because it's totally dark, you know. So I have to work like this and to find my way in the dark. I used small spotlights and lots of lamps and to pinpoint the objects I wanted to project on the paper. And many times I did 20, 30 expositions on the same paper, and then I would develop it. And I would continue until I get something out of the developing machine that could talk to me. Otherwise, well, I had to begin from the beginning again. But almost immediately I discovered that grief is not a pure feeling. It's full of contradictions, actually. Grief is so strong that it inspires life, almost like a life intoxication. This surprised me so much because I was so close to death at that point as a healthy and living person can be. And I really wanted to be there in this dark place. But I wasn't allowed because life came pushing in without asking for permission. I made a lot of images that are ripped up with violence, rage, survival rage. And before I make a photogram, I have to prepare the situation mentally, technically, and arrange to make chance to collaborate with me. And then I sort of go into the dark room and make my lonely performance in there. And suddenly another world could appear from something very simple and concrete, like leaves or water or so. But actually at this point I walked around halfway in the land of the dead because my beloved was there and I lived in his company and I was bound to a man that was dead and he didn't exist. But as time passed, and all of a sudden, you know, I said I had promised myself just to follow my impulses. So then I had this idea that I wanted to work with intestines and guts and those kind of things. And I thought, okay, well, I have to do it because I have promised not to censor anything. So I went to a slaughterhouse, and that was really fantastic. And those people, they gave me all kinds of things, and I had this little trolley, and I went there, and I gave them a cake in return because, you know, you have to be nice. So every time I went with a cake, and I went away with all kinds of things because I really wanted to make something repugnant, something difficult, something repulsive. But I was very happy because I could make interesting things with those. Happily, I have very good colleagues in my studio. They have to put up with me coming home with, you know, intestines and all those things. But one day I saw this horse head hanging there. You know, the cranium, the horse cranium, and the everything was ripped off the cranium, but the eye was still there. And I was looking, and I thought, oh, it's impossible to make a photogram out of that. It will just be like a black lump. How can I make a picture of that? But I just felt I needed that horse head. So I took it in my trolley, I went to my studio and into the dark again, and I started to work with this. And that was so difficult. I worked days and nights, and actually, it was really just, the picture was a black lump, as I thought, and I didn't know what to do. So in the end, I was on the verge of giving up, but then I just ripped up the eye, you know, this disgusting. I was really a little afraid of that eye, but I ripped it up in the dark, all this in the dark, you know, and I threw it like that. And then I sneaked in with my hand in the hole where the eye used to be, and I lit it up with a little light thing, and then finally this picture came to me. You know, so now the pain and the horror was outside of me, transformed into paper. I remember I was so excited when this picture came out, but at the same time I felt it was not equal to the strong feelings I had inside of me. Because when one's inner world is ending up in a two-dimensional paper, it's all very, very incomplete, actually. But afterwards, I have seen that this picture contain both life and death. You know, the black messenger of death and the red signal of life itself. So this image concludes the first part of the story, which was very, very violent. And then after this, I began to notice that this first period of violence had passed, and I started to feel like I was floating, you know, hovering freely. I felt more and more without identity. The loss of him was an amputation. Who was I now without him? So all the photograms I did now were suspended and dissolved in their expression. I had a strange sensation of being weightless in a blue, starry space without any sound, and all was absence. I wasn't aware of this happening then. I just made these pictures, but afterwards I've seen that I was actually telling a story about grieving, and in this period the pictures were dirty, moldy, chaotic, but sometimes I could feel a desire and a pleasure making them. And I found it was fun to make a picture. It was a game, and in the dark room I was free to play, and that was life-saving for me. You know, being alive, being alive includes being hit or afflicted by something. I mean, love, illness, hatred. We will lose. To grieve is to try to heal the wounds loss causes us. Therefore, there is no way around it. You just have to jump right into the darkness. And right there, maybe there is an opening. I had a feeling that maybe I could start again. I knew by intuition that if I would repel the pain, I would also lose something very, very precious, maybe even a part of myself. So therefore, in any way I could, I dedicated myself to the grieving. And now it had almost been 2 years. And I was coming to a point zero. And I let myself finally fall, and I gave up. I wanted to call attention to death. I wanted to abandon hope. It was time to find a new beginning. The pictures, they were made from within, without speculation, actually. I just made them. I did that all the time. But as you can see, the images continue to talk of a fall, but now there was a change coming up. Everything was easier now, and after the descent, I knew I was close to a parting, a divorce. So I made this photogram. you know, I had to dissolve a marriage alone without being able to say goodbye to him. I tried to allow myself to get angry with him, but he could not answer. I wanted to be seen that he had to go. I left him. I let him go free. I asked him to leave our house and stop tormenting us. He couldn't help us anyway. I filed for divorce, although he was a part of me. Then I made a torso, a male torso, almost against my will. And this picture was the end of a long period of disintegration and confusion. I began to feel that I had moved to the side of life. I was looking for something lighter, something vibrant, maybe even something erotic. And I started to, I got this another impulse. So I started to feel I wanted to do something with water. I didn't really understand why. Here we have the water coming up. I didn't really understand why. And again, I didn't censor. I just made aquariums so that I would be able to make pictures working in a new way with water. And that was very fun. I just let them come, and I didn't ask anything or interpret anything. But when I look at these pictures now, I think they express something very primitive, like a genesis, like an origin. It was no longer the horror landscapes I had been into. Maybe there is not life yet, but there is a breeding ground for life, and in this mud, the organisms can start to grow. And also, I've seen something very crucial afterwards, when I started to see that this was a story. I could see horizon in the pictures. You see, there are horizons. And that was new to me. The earlier images were without perspective, captured in the lack of freedom. So my sense of being incorporated in life increased during this time. I experienced intensely my loneliness, but I began to feel I was in connection with the living again, with things and people. So even my walks were different. Before, the beautiful city was like a scenery for my anxiety and my grieving and pain. But now I felt that the city was a part of me. And I was a part of a living context and not excluded any longer. And in this picture, you can see a hint of something else, maybe like an intrusion or like a conception. And all this seemed to happen in my inner world or in my dark room. And here, more horizons and water. And this picture is the last water picture I made. And now it had been more than 2 years since he died. So after that one, I suddenly felt, no, I have enough of water. I don't need more water now. I have to do something else. So then another impulse came to me, and I didn't censor it. Again, I did the same thing. And the impulse was that I wanted to make a picture of the body. And I thought, how am I going to make a picture of the body, a photogram without camera? And so that's a complicated thing. But I tried, and I did many, maybe hundreds, I don't know how many. But after a time, this torso came out. And I knew at once, I'm finished. All I then would add would be superfluous. I was done. I had returned to my own body, my own life, after a long, long journey. In fact, Life is a chain of gifts, but it's also a chain of losses, starting with the loss of the womb of our mother and ending with the loss of ourselves. Maybe we shouldn't expect life to be a happy story. Maybe happiness is trying to do something productive of your suffering, because suffering enables us to learn things and to know things that we wouldn't have known otherwise. To grieve and then go on is to keep sane. Anyway, this experience and this story I showed you now here of loss and grieving has given me a great surprise. I never imagined there would be so much color in the darkness. Thank you.